Well, we go from the links to the octagon as UFC 300 is set for this weekend, Saturday night. It's going to be prelims on ESPN, then you have ESPN Plus carrying the main card. In to discuss it is our Fight Game correspondent, Adam Stern. Adam, thanks for joining the podcast.
Thank you.
Adam, it seems like Dana White and company has really rolled out an incredible lineup here, and not just for the main card, for the prelims too that are going to be airing on ESPN. Who are some of the fighters that could really move the needle for that window? Because we've already seen a strong start for ESPN UFC prelims in 2024. They're up 25% already to date. What's going to move the needle here?
Well, Austin, this is UFC's 687th show ever, and UFC 100 was in 2009. UFC
Remember that show? Yeah.
UFC 200 was in 2016. So these only happen every 7-8 years that you get a numerical kind of perfect number like this. So UFC 300, they've set up a really big card. What was interesting in the lead up to this was there was a little bit of debate about, is the main event big enough? The main event, Jamal Hill versus Alex Pereira, it's a good fight, but it's not with one of their absolute biggest fighters on their roster. But what's interesting here is, as you mentioned, the early prelims and prelims are so strong. And in the end, they have 12 former fighters or current fighters on this card, which is the most ever. So out of 687 ever events for UFC, this is breaking records. And right from the get-go, some of these fights are very strong. The second fight will be Jim Miller versus Bobby Green. Jim Miller has the most wins in UFC history. A couple fights later, Jalen Turner, another very popular UFC fighter. Right after that, you'll have Holly Holm versus Kayla Harrison. Holly Holm is one of the most popular women fighters in UFC history. And then UFC just signed Kayla Harrison from PFL, and she was basically PFL's biggest star, and she's going to be making her UFC debut here. So that's going to be a really big fight. Right after that, you've got Aljamain Sterling versus Calvin Kattar. Two other really big names. Again, these are the early prelims and prelims. These sort of fighters would usually be in the main card. And then you move to the main card and the names are just insane. Bo Nickel is one of UFC's real rising stars. He was a NCAA wrestling champion just a couple years ago, and they signed him after he graduated from college, and he's become one of their rising stars. Charles Oliveira is going to fight in their main card. He's one of their biggest names. Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje is going to be just pure violence, which UFC fans really like. Those are two fighters who just stand in the middle and just stand and trade. They don't wrestle a lot. They just like to stand there and, punch the other guy in the face, and they'll take a couple punches to make it happen. So it's going to be a really strong card up and down.
I remember that UFC 100 that you referenced, Frank Mir and Brock Lesnar. I remember watching that with a bunch of friends. That was an incredible bout. But something interesting that I'm going to be watching for is I think that these UFC prelims are going to outdraw what ABC is going to be having. They have an NHL game in that primetime slot. I think it's going to outdraw what the NHL does in that window. Really interested to see what the numbers bring. But beyond the numbers there, I think UFC has kind of been setting up for perhaps even a bigger announcement with Conor McGregor. We saw him and the rollout of his role in that Roadhouse film, and there was promotion around that film during UFC 299. Do you think there might be some more news that comes out this weekend?
Well, the Roadhouse coming out is a big point of it, because one thing Dana White has been saying consistently was that Conor McGregor was not going to come back and fight until that was done. And so now that's finally done, and they've gone down. Now, bear in mind, Conor McGregor, UFC's biggest star, has not fought in over 2 years. Imagine Patrick Mahomes not playing an NFL game in 2 years. This is UFC's biggest star, and he hasn't fought in over 2 years. So some people thought he might not ever come back. He's extremely rich. On top of everything he made in UFC, he sold his liquor brand for over $500 million to a major conglomerate. He's got a lot of money. So Dana White himself has said it's not 100% sure that he will come back. But just last week, we saw Dana White put out a little teaser post, and then 24 hours, Conor McGregor did the same thing. A video teasing Conor McGregor. It was him walking down a hallway, and it was saying coming soon. And so it seems like there's a possibility they could announce that at 300. Like I said, the main event at UFC 300 at the top doesn't have that real big name, and that's just for various reasons. Like we said, Conor McGregor was filming Roadhouse, so he wasn't able to get into this. Sean O'Malley, another one of their big old names, fought recently, so he wasn't here. Khamzat Chimaev is fighting in Saudi Arabia in a couple months. So for various reasons, the main event isn't UFC's biggest names at UFC 300. It's still big names, but not their absolute biggest. But if they announce Conor McGregor is coming back at UFC 300, that would be incredible.
Dana White always likes to, rock the fighting world, so I can see him making a big announcement like that. Last thing for you, Adam. Obviously, UFC, one of the bigger sports properties out there with a media rights deal coming up. What's the latest on that front?
Yeah, of course, their deal is through 2025, so they've still got some time left. It seems like they've kind of already informally started talks, although I believe the formal window doesn't start till next January. But Mark Shapiro said at a recent conference that they've already heard from 3 companies who would love to talk to them if they don't strike a deal with ESPN. Of course, we know they're going to be looking for a significant increase in rights because they believe that this is a top tier property. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with them and ESPN. But they also noted that ideally they'd like to stay with ESPN. This is a relationship that UFC has loved. You know, from the start, Dana White has called it a dream for UFC to be on ESPN. It was kind of the capping off a dream for them to get to the biggest media company in the US. And so I think they want to keep it going if they can get the right deal. But if not, they're already signaling that they have some other companies who want to bid.
Well, UFC 300 on Saturday, a big event for TKO Group and Endeavor. Adam Stern, our Fight Game correspondent, thanks for filling us in.
Thank you.